Journey of a Sister. Year 10. A Marriage of Minds. Cezanne leaves Charles to deal with all the legalities of getting married abroad, while she organises the wedding venue, booking the hotel, sending out invitations and getting their outfits made, etc. The last thing they would want is to get married abroad and then find out their marriage isn't valid in the UK, so they hire an overseas wedding planning agency to make sure everything is in order. Their plan was to keep it simple. No more than 50 guests, a small ceremony with wedding and honeymoon all in the same place. However, the more they plan, the more complicated it becomes, with family members wanting special privileges, people asking for help with their airfare, friends wanting to bring their partners, other friends demanding to know why they hadn't been invited, parents complaining about the price of flights because of the school holiday. When Charles asks Maria if Ebony can be bridesmaid, she point-blank refuses, saying there's no way she's going to allow him to take Ebony out of the country. But when he offers to pay for her flight and all her expenses so she could accompany Ebony, she finally agrees. Charles's mother, Ma Ankra, is now in her late 70s. She had developed a phobia for flying over the last few years, but when Charles tells her he's getting married abroad, she soon overcomes her fear. There's no way she's going to miss her only son's wedding. With the money they saved from having a wedding in England, they offer to contribute towards airfares and provide accommodation for their guests. It's time for me to change my coil, Cezanne announces. Charles doesn't have a clue what she's talking about. What coil? Don't you remember? I told you I'd had a coil fitted when you asked why I wasn't getting pregnant. Oh, yes. Sorry, I forgot. So it's time for what? To have it removed. I can either get a new one fitted or we can try for a baby, she says, sitting on his lap. Charles rests his hand on her stomach. A baby sounds nice, he replies, giving her a kiss on the lips. Build up to the big day. Their wedding is scheduled for Friday the 29th of July 2016. Most of their guests are due to arrive on the Thursday, but Cezanne, Charles, the boys, Dave, Charles's best man, and Cezanne's chief bridesmaid arrive in Jamaica on the Monday to help with all the preparations. It's so hot that they have to spend the first day inside their villa with all the fans on, acclimatising to the heat. Cezanne had planned it so that all the men closest to Charles stay in one villa with him prior to the wedding, and all the women closest to her stay in another villa. Other guests would stay in a nearby hotel. They had agreed that staying in separate accommodation leading up to their wedding would only add to the excitement and anticipation. They want their wedding night to be extra special. They are both aware something deeply spiritual had happened the night she had danced for him, and ever since then, their lovemaking had gone to another level. So now, before making love, they make a point of preparing themselves for each sacred sexual encounter. Charles had agreed not to eat any meat that week, and they also had agreed not to consume any alcohol. Cezanne brought all the things they would need for their sex ritual, including incense, candles, massage oil, and music. Pre-wedding celebrations. Charles had made sure that Maria and Ebony were on the same flight as his sisters, their children, and his mother, in the hope that they would all bond together. His sisters took an immediate disliking to Maria, but they loved Ebony. Ma Ankra took Maria in as one of her own, so by the time they arrive in Jamaica, they are all like family. The day before the wedding, Charles and Cezanne spend the afternoon and evening entertaining their arriving guests in the hotel lounge. They enjoy reuniting with friends and family, especially the ones they hadn't seen in years. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, their mentors, had also come for the wedding, saying they wouldn't have missed it for the world. Charles introduces them to his and Suzanne's mothers, and the older generation form a little clique of their own. Charles gives Dave the task of taking Maria under his wing so she doesn't feel isolated. Dave is attracted to her, but he can see that she still has feelings for Charles. Micah and Elijah form a group with young people their own age. They sit outside playing loud rap music on one of the young men's portable stereo. "Turn that music off!" Suzanne rushes over to them. "Why, Mum?" asks Elijah. "The frequencies are all off." "But this is what our generation listens to," a young man answers politely. "You're changing the whole vibe of the place," Suzanne objects. They turn off the music and decide to go swimming in the pool instead. Micah asks Maria if Ebony can join them and the other children. She agrees, but under the condition that they stay in the shallow end of the pool. They say okay, even though they know 5-year-old Ebony is a great swimmer, since Charles had been teaching her since she was 2. Suzanne tries one more time to befriend Maria, but as she approaches her, Maria gets up and walks off, mumbling something about needing a cigarette. She passes a silent blessing over Maria and carries on mingling with the other guests. By 8 p.m, Suzanne is ready to head back to her villa for an early night. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Men talk. Charles and his group of men are chilling in their villa. "I still can't believe you're getting married," comments Dave, glugging from a cold can of beer. "Why is that such a big shock to you?" Charles asks his best man. "Well, look how long we've known each other, Charles. You've always been really particular about the type of women you date, and now here you are getting married to a woman with 2 kids. "They're not kids, Dave. They're young men, and I'm proud to be part of their lives. Besides, when love strikes, you're powerless to resist, and the circumstances don't really matter." "So what's so special about Suzanne?" Ishmael, one of his old schoolmates, asks. "Yeah, why choose her over the woman you've already got a child with?" asks Simon. "And she ain't half bad looking either," comments Dave, referring to Maria. Charles looks around to make sure no one is within hearing distance. "Promise me this won't go any further than these 4 walls," he whispers. The other brothers cross their fingers over their chests in half-solemn oaths. "Well, it's like this. Suzanne and I, when we make love, it's like nothing I've ever experienced before. Seriously, it's like we enter another world. We literally get transported into another dimension." The other brothers look at each other before bursting into fits of laughter. "That sounds like some freaky kind of sex, man," Will comments. "So when you enter into this other dimension, what do you see? Angels, aliens, or what?" Paul jokes. Charles remains silent. "Oh, don't take it to heart. We're just messing with you, bro." "But were you serious about the aliens?" Paul asks again. "I didn't mention aliens," Charles responds calmly, getting up to refill his glass of water. "Sounds like you figured out how to open the portal," Ishmael says quite seriously. "So tell us why you chose Suzanne over Maria," Dave asks again. "How can I explain it? This woman of mine, Suzanne, she's like my soulmate, you know? If you seriously want to know what I'm talking about, I suggest you find your goddesses and your queens too. Until you do, you won't be able to enter the gateway that leads to heaven on earth." The big day. The wedding is scheduled for 11 a.m. Suzanne had wanted it to take place early so they could be away somewhere quiet by 6 p.m. She rises with the sun and goes outside into the pool area to meditate. An hour or so later, her sister Janice joins her. "Morning, sis." "Oh, morning, Janice. Where's Felicia and Christina?" "They're still sleeping." "What are you doing up so early?" "I just finished my meditation," she informs her as she begins her stretches, facing the morning sun. "Oh, it's so peaceful here." Janice turns her face towards the sun too. "Yes, it's lovely." "So how do you feel? Today's the big day." "I feel happy and grateful. God couldn't have chosen a better man for me. Yes, Charles is a lovely guy, and he's got money too. I hope I find someone like him. Yes, well, money can't buy happiness or love. And besides, when you meet the right person, there's nothing you can't achieve together. Is that so? Of course. Well, you two seem to have it figured out. So how did you attract someone like him anyway? Janice asks. Out of all the sisters, Cezanne had been considered the least attractive because she was the darkest. Well, first of all, it starts with you. You've got to start by loving yourself. Then whatever you desire to see in your outer world, you must first create it within. So if it's love you're looking for, love yourself unconditionally from within. See what I mean? Yes, but I do love myself, and I still haven't attracted anyone like Charles. All the guys I seem to meet are full of themselves. Why can't I meet someone who's rich, handsome and spiritual? Well, you both have to be on the same wavelength mentally for a start. I developed an abundance mentality, so I attracted someone on that same frequency, and we were able to achieve financial independence together. I believe God was preparing us for each other long before we even met. Really? So what about Ebony and Maria? Yes, God can have a plan for your life, and if you go off track from that path, you can always get back on track again. It's never too late. So where does that leave Maria? Maria will attract the right man for her, someone on her frequency. The universe is abundant. She'll be fine. Just then, Felicia, Portia, Christina, and the two mothers appear. Good morning. Did you all sleep well? Cezanne asks, hugging them all. Yes, thanks, they reply. So you ready for your big dear? Asks her mother. I am. Portia, I'm getting in the shower. Can you style my hair after? She asks her other sister, who's a hairdresser by profession. Of course. I brought some extra hair to make a beehive style for you. No thanks. If you can just style my hair, that would be great. I brought some hairpins and a tiara. That should do, shouldn't it? Okay, it's your hair, Portia gives in. I'll do your makeup, Felicia volunteers. All right, but not too much. Charles prefers the natural look. Aren't you going to have breakfast first? Asks her mother. I'm going to make a smoothie a bit later. How is that going to sustain you for the day? Mum sounds concerned. I'll be fine, don't worry. When you're ready, call the hotel and order your breakfast. They'll bring it over. I'm getting in the shower now. Two become one. It's an open-air wedding held in the hotel courtyard where a large marquee has been set up. Beautiful arrangements of white and red roses decorate the walkway leading down to the altar where the ceremony will be taking place. Two purple and gold cushions lie at the altar along with a large white pillar candle standing upright and two long thin candles lying beside it. All the guests take their seats. Charles and Dave stand at the front in their purple suits, facing the guests while they wait for Cezanne. She's due to enter from the back and walk down the aisle to meet her groom. Micah and Elijah are sat on the front row at each end nearest the aisle. Alongside them are Charles and Cezanne's mothers and their mentors, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Soft organ music plays in the background. The guests talk quietly amongst themselves while they wait for the bride to arrive. Suddenly, the music becomes louder. All the guests turn around to see little Ebony walking down the aisle, dropping white rose petals from the basket she's carrying. Cezanne is following about 2 feet behind, with Janice in tow, carrying the train from Cezanne's dress. She had decided to do the walk alone since her father had passed and she didn't feel anyone else could replace him. She's wearing a purple satin and lace wedding dress with a long lace train, but had refused to wear a veil over her eyes, saying she's going into this marriage with her eyes wide open. She walks down the aisle slowly and gracefully at first, carrying her bouquet of red roses in front of her. Suddenly, she breaks into a Hallelujah dance, mixing African and contemporary dance steps together as she waves her bouquet high and low, giving thanks that this day has finally arrived. Everyone starts laughing and clapping as they cheer her on. Charles looks on in admiration as visions of her dancing for him the night he had made the decision to marry her resurfaces. He suddenly leaves his position and begins walking up the aisle to meet his bride, kissing his daughter on the forehead along the way. As he approaches, Cezanne realizes that the dream she'd had the year they met, of him walking towards her on their wedding day, was actually coming true. He offers her his arm, and they walk towards the altar together, Charles with a proud look on his face. By this time, everyone is standing and clapping, including Micah and Elijah. The only person who isn't happy is Maria, who rushes out in tears. Christina follows her. Cezanne and Charles are so caught up in the euphoria of the moment that they're oblivious to the situation. As they reach the priest, they turn and face each other. After the priest has performed the traditional part of the ceremony, they incorporate their own ritual into the rest of the proceedings. Kneeling on the purple cushions, they each pick up one of the long thin candles lying at the altar. Micah and Elijah get up and light them before returning to their seats. Holding the glowing candles, Charles and Cezanne take it in turns to say their vows based on conversations with God. I will use this marriage as an opportunity for mutual growth, full self-expression, and for ultimate reunion with God through the joining of our two souls. I will not lose myself in this marriage, but will use it to express who I really am. I recognize that while we are joining as one, we still have our individual paths to follow. I will allow you the freedom to walk your own path. The test of our relationship will not be how well I live up to your ideas, but how well I live up to my own ideas. Who am I being? I will not impose my will upon you or try to manipulate your mind. I promise to give you my love and energy without expecting the same in return. I will always remember that whatever I do to you, I do to myself, and whatever I do for you, I do for myself. As they gaze into each other's eyes, the crowd's attention is diverted by the flicker in the candle's flames. I know there will be challenges along the way, so I commit to doing whatever I can to make this relationship work, to always see the good, in you, and to constantly remind you of who you are through my actions. I will remember that winning or losing is not the test, only loving or failing to love. In any challenging situation, I will always ask myself, what would love do now? When they had finished making their vows to each other, they simultaneously light the large pillar candle, then blow out their individual candles, symbolizing two become one. Micah and Elijah present the rings. Charles takes the first ring from Elijah and places it on Cezanne's finger. Then she takes Charles's ring from Micah's cushion and places it on his finger. The priest announces, "You are now husband and wife." As Charles kisses his bride long and slow, their guests stand up again and applaud. Before they leave the altar, Elijah places a traditional African broom on the ground in front of them, and they jump the broom together. At the reception, Charles gives an emotional speech telling the flashback story of the day they met and the feelings that erupted as if they had known each other from somewhere before, perhaps a previous lifetime. He shares how every time they split up and got back together, it always felt like coming home. When they discovered they were twin souls, everything made sense. He tells them about the night he made the decision to marry Cezanne, the night she danced for him. He says he's proud to have inherited 2 wonderful sons like Micah and Elijah, and that he will continue to do his best to be a good role model for them. He addresses Maria personally, thanking her for blessing him with a beautiful daughter, and asks her to forgive him for following his heart, saying he's praying that God will provide the perfect partner for her too. Tears stream down Maria's face as he speaks to her heart to heart. Even Cezanne is finding it hard to hold back the tears. Little Ebony leaves her seat and approaches her father, who scoops her up into his left arm. Holding the mic with his right hand, he continues with his speech. I want to thank you all for coming out here and sharing this special occasion with Cezanne and myself, and making today such a beautiful day. To all you single women, keep visualizing yourself with your perfect partner. Think about what you want, not what you don't want in a relationship. And then ask yourself, if that man came along, would I be the type of woman he's looking for? Use your single time to develop yourself and prepare for your mate. And men, raise your consciousness levels. There are many queens out there waiting for their kings. They need you, and you need them. Find each other. He sits down to a resounding applause, with Ebony on his lap. When everything settles down again, Cezanne stands and walks to the centre of the dance floor. As the backing track to her poem True Love plays, she recites the poem she had written based on 1 Corinthians 13.
What is the true meaning of the word love? The thing is, love has so many meanings. So when you say to me, I love you, do you mean you're in love with the way I look? Or the way I make you feel? Or you love the way I walk, talk, laugh, smell, or appeal? Is it my smile that captivates you? Or the way I wear my hair? Or is it the clothes I wear that makes you stop and stare? Or is it that you love me because of how I treat you? With tender loving care. I cook for you, I clean for you, I massage you, I dote on you. Or do I love you for what you can give me? A nice home, fancy car, a lovely family, security. Do I love you with all sincerity, or am I just thinking of me? What is the true meaning of the word love? True love is a commitment of the heart. Right from the start it says, I choose to love you, whether we're together or apart. Love never fails. True love says, I'm going to be patient with you. When you try my patience, I'll still love you. Love never fails. True love is kind. It sows a seed. It's helpful, merciful, and benevolent to those in need. Love never fails. True love is never envious of what I have, but it inspires you to reach your own goals and doesn't boast when it does. Love never fails. True love isn't proud. Pride comes before a fall.
Giving Charles a knowing look.
You can stand tall. Love never fails. True love isn't rude or selfish and doesn't feel the need to be loud or to always have centre stage in a crowd. Love never fails. True love isn't easily angered. It forgives and forgets. Even when it's difficult, and it leaves no regrets. Love never fails. True love always protects, and when I'm down in the dumps, never rejoices in my downfall, only in my triumphs. Love never fails. True love always trusts, never accuses, always hopes, never doubts, always perseveres, never gives up. Love never fails. I love you unreservedly, and can you say you love me unconditionally? Love never fails.
When she finishes her poem, she turns and mouths to Charles, "I love you." And he mouths back, "I love you too." The reception is held in an elaborately decorated hall inside the hotel. For the opening dance, Charles had chosen Here and Now by Luther Vandross, while Cezanne chose Endless Love by Diana Ross and Lionel Richie. They dance as if they're the only two people in the room, reminiscent of the day they first met. Maria leaves the celebrations and loiters in the hotel lobby. Dave follows her. "Hi, Maria. How are you?" "How do you think I am?" she answers coldly. "Hey, listen, I'm on your side. I know this is painful for you. You're a brave woman, Maria. Not many women would have attended their ex's wedding. Well, I'm only here because of Ebony. I wish I hadn't come now. This is so unfair." She breaks down in tears. Allowing her to sob into his chest, Dave tentatively puts a hand around her bare shoulder. "If it's any consolation, I think Cezanne has nothing on you." "Really?" she asks, looking up at him with her big hazel eyes. "No, I mean, look at you. You're beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated. You know how to dress. I know who I'd be with if I was Charles," he says, admiring her lemon yellow mini dress against her bronze, flawless skin. "Okay, I know you're just saying that to make me feel better," she responds, dabbing her eyes dry with a handkerchief from her matching clutch bag. "No, I'm serious. I tried to get him to see sense, but he wasn't having any of it. I mean, Cezanne's a nice woman, don't get me wrong, but if I had to choose, I'd choose you every time." Maria pauses, taking in the compliments before suggesting, "I need to get out of here. Do you fancy a walk on the beach?" A spiritual union. Nobody sees or hears from Cezanne and Charles for the next 24 hours. When they emerge from the honeymoon suite, they look more in love and united than ever. Their sexual union is too sacred to mention here. Let's just say they have well and truly tied the knot. Their guests greet them with a big round of applause. Charles is surprised to see Maria and Ebony still there. They were due to fly out that morning, but Maria had decided to extend their stay so Ebony could bond with her new grandmother, aunties and cousins, she explains. "Daddy, Daddy!" Ebony runs up to him. He scoops her up into his arms. The boys come to greet them too. "Did you miss me?" Cezanne asks them. "Mum, look at us. We're not babies anymore." Elijah gives her a hug. They have one final get-together with their guests in the hotel's banqueting suite before they all leave the next day. As they all take part in the Last Supper, Dave pulls Charles to one side. "I've got something I need to tell you," he says hesitantly. "I'm all ears." "Man, I don't really know how to say this," Dave stutters. "Dave, how long have we known each other? You're practically my brother. Spit it out." "I've got a feeling I know what you're going to say anyway." "Really? Try me. You've taken a liking to Rhea, haven't you?" "How did you guess?" Charles chuckles. It's kind of obvious, bro. You want to know if I approve, right? You got me all sussed, haven't you? Of course I could tell you like Maria. Well, it's just that, well, no one's ever made me feel the way she does, Charles. I couldn't help myself. I've fallen for her hook, line and sinker. I'm sorry. Well, you have my blessing. I do? Of course. What better stepfather could I possibly want for my daughter than my best friend? Charles gives Dave a man hug. Journey of a Sister, Year 11. Double celebrations? A year later. Cezanne is lying across her husband's lap, doing her pelvic floor muscle exercises. She silently gives thanks for her answered prayers. She's happily married to the man of her dreams, living in their dream home, running a successful business together, and to put the cherry on the top, they have 3 wonderful children between them, with another one on the way. As they relax on their large purple sofa, fertile ground plays softly in the background. It reminds Cezanne of how long it has taken to build their relationship into the solid structure it is now. It had been a lot of hard work, laying the foundation and painstakingly building upon it bit by bit. But it had been worth the effort, and now nothing could tear it down, unless they themselves chose to. And they had worked far too hard to want to destroy what they had built together. The roses on the cushions decorating their sofa make a positive affirmation of their love, stronger than thorns. One of the things that has helped to build a solid foundation to their relationship is that they both continue to work on their own personal development. By giving each other the space they need to grow, they have allowed their love to blossom, like the roses on the cushions. On a glass table beside the sofa stands a framed picture of their wedding day, Suzanne's trophy. She had also been inspired to choose photographs of herself with Charles in their happiest moments and to add each of their vows to the photos. She had printed and framed all 10 commitments and displayed them around their home to act as a constant reminder of the promises they had made to each other. Initially, Charles hadn't believed in the institution of marriage, believing that it's a spiritual union that only God could sanction, not a man-made ceremony. However, he wanted to make Cezanne happy and provide more stability for the family, and set a good example for the boys. Plus, legally, there were tax breaks he could take advantage of. He knew that he had married his twin soul and soulmate, and there would be no messy divorce or fighting over assets. They're both in this for life, as inscribed on the inside of their rings. Cezanne knows Charles is committed to her wholeheartedly, and so here they are, celebrating their first year of wedded bliss. They have reason for double celebrations too, since they are also expecting the imminent birth of their first child together. Charles slides her top up, revealing her huge, ripe belly, tight like a drum. Soon, we won't be able to call this our love bump anymore. He rests his head to hear the baby's heartbeat. As soon as he's born, I'm going to work out his life path number so we can give him a name that will help him fulfill his destiny. That's a good idea. I'll get his birth chart report done as well. Great! My son will have the best start in life. I hope he gets your rich skin colour too. Why? All that melanin will be a blessing to him. Charles chuckles. Happy anniversary, babes. We should have done this years ago. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't given me another chance. To think I nearly lost you. Well, we have the rest of our life to spend together now. What more could Cezanne ask for? They have created their own unique version of heaven on earth and are living the life of their dreams. Love is a wonderful gift between two souls experiencing heaven on earth. Break free from mental slavery. Now in the 3rd trimester of her pregnancy, Cezanne makes sure to keep herself mentally and physically active. After her morning meditation and stretches, she writes for a couple of hours freehand before relaxing. Twice a week she attends aqua aerobics, which helps keep her flexible. Charles's mother, Ma Ankara, Ma, short for Grandma, now lives with them and sometimes accompanies Cezanne to the classes, as they're good for her too. From the beginning of her pregnancy, Cezanne had made a conscious decision to keep herself feeling happy because she knows her moods will affect the baby. Even though Cezanne has a good reason to spend her days lounging, she still feels a driving force within to share the knowledge she has gained since asking God for the truth. What had started out as research for her poems has turned into enough material to write a whole book. She now writes a weekly blog covering topics such as black sex and spirituality, mental slavery, and how to raise a black child. She is now convinced that the Bible was written in metaphors and that the stories have a deeper esoteric meaning and were never meant to be taken literally. She explains how manuscripts stolen from ancient Kemet were plagiarized and rewritten to create holy books. They still carry a lot of truth, but omit key words and information that would enable followers to master their life. Instead, they had become mentally enslaved by these new, fear-based, organized religions. And since it's mainly her people who are believers, she feels obligated to help them break free from mental slavery. Then there's the issue of post-traumatic slave syndrome. Dr. Joy DeGroy, an African-American social worker, had written a book detailing how the Black Holocaust had affected the minds of enslaved Africans. She had shown how racism was the root cause of the slave trade and how religion was used to keep captured Africans subservient to whites. Dr. DeGroy also explained how the trauma they suffered is still affecting their descendants and what we can do to heal. Cezanne realizes her own beatings as a child were a direct remnant of plantation life. Enslaved Africans were whipped mercilessly to break them down mentally. She learned that when someone suffers extreme physical trauma, their mind has to disassociate in order to cope with the pain. Breaking down the psyche made it easier for enslavers to reprogram the mind. Cezanne informs her readers that the media is purposefully being used to enslave the minds of the masses. She explains that the subconscious mind responds best to images, which is why early writings were done in pictures, such as hieroglyphs and cave paintings. The ancient Egyptians had taught Europeans this science, but they had abused the knowledge and instead kept it within a select few and used it to create a plan for world domination. Instead of teaching people how to use the power of the mind to create heaven on earth, they had developed ways to influence the subconscious mind without people realizing they were being programmed. She tackles the issue of subliminal messages hidden in films, music, adverts, and programs on television. By showing certain images over and over again, they were able to influence the masses to do what they wanted them to do. They developed a long-term strategy to take complete control over the minds of the masses and mentally enslave them. They particularly had to work on black people, because if they were to ever remember who they are, the game would be over. Knowing how spiritual and emotional black people are, they created fear-based religions that would keep them humble and subservient. By using a white man as the image of God, they had put themselves in a position of power. The fear of not knowing what happens after death was their biggest trump card, which they played over and over again. Meanwhile, they did everything they told believers not to do: lie, steal, rape, kill, plunder, and blaspheme. If they really believed they would go to hell when they died, would they be enslaving the minds of the masses? Cezanne's blog readership had grown in numbers, and she has now become an influencer. She uses this position to advise her readers of all races to stop allowing themselves to be controlled by the media. She explains that those who control the media like to promote fear instead of love, but that love is the most powerful force in the universe. She advises not to feed into their agenda, but to focus on what they want to create, which should be their own little version of heaven on earth. If everyone was doing this, the whole world would be a paradise, she says. Unite and fight. While Cezanne had been studying her story, she wondered why racism exists. If what she had learned was true, and the black woman is indeed the mother of all nations, it stands to reason that all other races evolved from the African race. Yet it seems Europeans would rather say they evolved from apes than from Africans. Dr. Walker had given a few theories as to where white people came from. One of them was that an African scientist named Jacob had accidentally created albinos. They lacked melanin and became outcasts because of their recessive gene. They ended up in the Caucasus Mountains, where they spent the Ice Age living in caves. This vast drop in temperature had changed their temperament, making them cold in nature. To Cezanne, this explains Europeans' hatred towards the African race and their desire to reclaim their birthright by any means necessary. Yet it didn't explain where Asians or Chinese people came from. Upon further research, Cezanne discovers that 2 dark-skinned people are able to make a white baby, but 2 white people cannot make a melanin-rich baby. All other races came from the African race. Even she has white blood in her, since her ancestors had been raped on the plantations in Jamaica. If she didn't have white blood in her, she would have been as dark as Charles. The current craze of buying DNA testing kits to trace one's ancestry didn't appeal to Cezanne. Most of the videos she had watched of people getting their results only proved that most people's blood is all mixed up anyway. Cezanne decides to focus on the power of the collective consciousness, rather than skin colour. After a meditation with her higher self, she writes a message to the people. We are all connected to each other and to every living thing, including the God force that flows in and around us. The dark forces want us to believe that we are separate from each other. They use the same tactics they have always used: divide and conquer. She explains that the current world system is designed to keep us as individuals, disconnected from each other and our source. In truth, she writes, there is no I, there is only we. She breaks down the word individual, explaining that the word actually means to divide into 2. As long as we continue to allow ourselves to be brainwashed into believing that we are separate from each other, we are advancing their agenda, which is for 1% of the population to rule over everyone else. The effect of this, she explains, is that on a mass consciousness level, the human race are powerless to work together to achieve peace on earth. If we want to create a world where we can all live together in peace and harmony, we have to acknowledge the law of oneness, she advises. Instead of becoming more civilized with the recent technological advancements, we are becoming more dehumanized, she warns. Stop allowing your mind to be subliminally programmed through the television, mainstream music, films, games, newspapers, and magazines. Educate yourself outside of mainstream media. Spend time tuning into yourself. Remember that what you do to another, you do to yourself. If we carry on like this as a human race, we will self-destruct. Fear not. How can I help humanity to unite? Cezanne ponders. The answer comes to her immediately. Love. Love? Yes, love is the answer. Love is the complete opposite of fear and banishes fear like a small candle lit in a dark room, her inner voice advises. Yes, but how do we apply that practically? She asks again. Fill yourself up with love until there's no room left for fear. It makes sense, but people have already been programmed to hate themselves. Black people had been programmed through religion to fear God and to put others before themselves. This belief had resulted in her people handing over the wealth of their motherland to others. How can you fear God if God is love? She asks her social media followers, which starts a big online debate. She writes a blog on the topic saying that white people had been programmed to believe that they were the superior race, even though it had been scientifically proven that black people's skin, blood, organs, intellect and spirituality made them the dominant race genetically. She said white women were spending money to look more black, while black women were spending money to look more white. Why not just love yourself for who you are, unconditionally? She addresses each race, saying that Asians have a caste system which puts the darkest skinned people at the bottom of society. They are called untouchables. Yet in Cezanne's history classes, even Asia was originally populated by ancient Africans. And the Chinese were fast becoming the new colonizers, quietly buying up land in Africa and the Caribbean. They were offering huge loans which they knew could never be repaid. When they were ready, they would simply take over and move their overpopulated citizens in. White elitist men fear the day black people wake up and remember who they are. So far, their religions had done a good job in keeping them docile, so they wouldn't retaliate. Other systems they put in place, such as the justice system, were also aimed at preventing an uprising. This system of class and status is based on fear, Cezanne concludes. It had been created by white males who secretly fear the black man and woman. They had somehow managed to get all other races to see white as a standard of beauty and status, with negative connotations attached to anything black. All this is based on skin colour instead of the person's character, she writes. Cezanne advises her readers that the more they act out of love instead of fear, the more they will attract other people of all races who do the same. These are the people who will help her extend her plan of creating heaven on earth. When a thought comes to her that there is nothing to fear in the future, she sets the intention that whenever she finds herself in a dark place, she will remind herself, I am the light. Breaking news. It's 9:45 p.m. on a Friday night, June 2017. Cezanne is lying on the sofa, feeling like a beached whale, while Micah sits on the floor in front of her as they watch a DVD together. Elijah is out with his friends, Ma Ankra has long gone to bed and Charles still isn't home yet. The front doorbell rings. "Who could that be at this time of the night?" she asks Micah. "Maybe Elijah forgot his key," he guesses as he gets up to answer it. Micah returns with a worried look on his face. "Mum, it's the police. They want to speak to you." Cezanne's mind immediately runs on Elijah. "Don't tell me he's gone and gotten himself into trouble," she thinks as she heaves herself up from the sofa. But Elijah had never been in trouble, not in school or in college, let alone with the police, and his friends weren't the type to lead him astray either. She wonders what could possibly be bringing the police to her house so late in the evening. Micah supports her as she makes her way to the front door. "Mrs. Ankra?" the policeman asks. "Yes, what is it?" "Can we come in?" "Is something wrong? Where's Elijah?" "Elijah?" The policeman looks puzzled. "Isn't that what you're here about, my son?" "Oh, no, I think you'd better sit down, Mrs. Ankra. We have some bad news for you." "What's this all about?" She tries not to panic as she senses the seriousness of the reason for their visit. "It's about your husband, Charles Ankra." "Yes, what about him?" "Well, I'm sorry to inform you, but about an hour ago he was involved in a serious car accident. He suffered multiple broken bones and internal injuries." Cezanne gasps. "No, you must be mistaken. Surely?" The policeman takes a set of keys out of his pocket. "Do you recognise these?" he asks with a smirk. He dangles the keys to Charles's black Mercedes in front of her face. The keyring has a picture of Ebony on one side and herself and the boys on the other. Yes, they're my husband's." The policeman hands them to her. "Is he okay? How did this happen?" she asks in a confused state as she takes them. "We're still investigating the cause of the crash, Mrs. Ankra, but we're here to escort you to the hospital if you like. He told us you were due just before he passed out." "Passed out? He is still alive, isn't he?" "Yes, but they don't hold much hope for him. Shall we go now?" As Cezanne nervously gathers her things together, she tells Micah to call Dave and Elijah and tell them both to meet them at the hospital. Micah takes it upon himself to also call his auntie Janice to let her know her sister would be needing her. The drive to the hospital seems to take forever, but Cezanne remains positive within herself that everything will be all right. "When are you due?" the policewoman turns to ask. "Any day now," she responds, taking hold of Micah's hand. Cezanne sees a faint look of dismay flash briefly across the policewoman's face. Just then she remembers that she hadn't told her mother-in-law that her son was in hospital. She calls Janice and asks her to collect Ma Ankra on her way. Arriving at the ward, Cezanne is unprepared for what she sees. Charles's broken body is barely recognisable as he lies lifeless on the hospital bed. His head is wrapped in a large bandage and he's wearing a brace to keep his broken neck in place. Tubes are attached to different parts of his body, which is connected to a life support machine. When she catches sight of him, all the air leaves her lungs. Shock, horror, and disbelief overwhelm her. As her knees give way, Micah and the policeman catch her while the policewoman quickly pulls up a chair for her. As she sits down, a doctor comes into the room. "Doctor, please tell me. He will live, won't he?" The doctor looks Cezanne straight in her eyes and tells her gently, "He's in a coma, Mrs. Ankra. Apart from his broken neck and internal injuries, an MRI scan has revealed extensive damage to his brain. It's only the life support machine keeping him alive now." "Oh, my dear God! Charles!" Cezanne lets out a blood-curdling scream. She gets up and, resting her hands on his chest, begs, "Please don't leave me!" Charles opens his eyes. He appears not to be looking at her, but into her. There's no fear in his eyes, only peace, love, and contentment, as if he doesn't have a care in the world. It's only for a brief second, but in that moment, Cezanne sees straight through to his soul, as if his body is just a veil, shrouding his true identity. As his real self is revealed, his aura becomes visible to her. Cezanne feels as if she's being cocooned in love, light, peace, happiness, and purity. The two police make their exit. Just then, Dave, Maria, and Ebony arrive. They had spoken to the doctor and are aware of the graveness of the situation. Micah speaks to them briefly in hushed tones before taking the opportunity to go and call his brother again to find out what's taking him so long. As he heads towards the main entrance, he sees his auntie Janice and Portia supporting Ma Ankra in between them. They hurry towards him. "Oh, thank goodness, there you are. Is everything okay?" asks Janice. "It doesn't look good," Micah whispers, shaking his head at the ground. "Where are they?" Ma Ankra asks anxiously. "They're in room 9. He points the way. As they enter, the silent, healing sensation of love and peace that had filled the room envelopes them as well, connecting them all. It seems to be emanating from Charles. It's obvious he's dying. Cezanne, Dave, Maria, and Ebony are all holding hands around his bed, as if in silent prayer. Janice and Portia join them. "Oh Lord, no!" Ma Ankra cries out as she catches sight of her son. "Please, I beg you, Lord, don't take my only son from me." She joins Cezanne in leaning over his body and praying. Micah re-enters with Elijah. Up to this point, Elijah had been in total denial about the seriousness of the situation, so the look on his face when he catches sight of Charles is of utter disbelief. He immediately goes over to his mother and puts a protective arm around her shoulder. Cezanne is focused on willing Charles to live. She refuses to believe that he's going anywhere. He's happily married. He has a beautiful daughter, 2 adopted sons who look up to him, as well as the birth of his new baby to look forward to. He's the CEO of a successful business. He's rich. He has everything to live for. But she had seen something when he opened his eyes. His soul was liberated. It no longer had any interest in the body or its roles and responsibilities. It had let go of relationships and detached from all the cares of this world. He had moved from body consciousness to soul consciousness. He is now a free spirit. Cezanne suddenly remembers 2 of the vows they had made to each other on their wedding day, to allow their souls to each walk their own paths and not to try to impose their will upon each other. What is his soul trying to do? "Sweetheart, do you want to stay or leave?" she asks him. The moment she lets go of her need to keep Charles attached to this world, his spirit leaves his body. Dave picks up Ebony and whispers, "Say goodbye to your daddy, princess." Ebony kisses Charles lightly on the cheek before turning away, burying her face in Dave's neck. Maria takes her from him, and as mother and daughter hug each other crying, Dave puts his arms around them both, trying to be strong. Charles had been closer to him than any of his brothers. As Charles crosses the threshold into eternal life, Cezanne begins to sob uncontrollably, first quietly, then getting louder and louder as the realization of the situation sinks in. Her and Ma's wailings bring the doctor and nurses back in. They turn off the life support machine and begin removing the tubes from his body. The sight of the flatline is too final. Cezanne lets out a blood-curdling "No!" Any moment now, she thinks she must wake up from what has to be a horrible dream. But somehow she knows this isn't just a nightmare. She can feel her heart breaking all over again as she experiences an overwhelming feeling of emptiness and sorrow. Her sisters do their best to comfort her as she wails loudly and uncontrollably. She begins hyperventilating, holding onto her stomach. "Doctor, I think she's in pain," Portia calls out to the doctor. He looks over and exclaims in his Asian accent, "Oh my gosh, I think she's going into labor. Are you feeling pain anywhere?" he asks Cezanne. She nods as she continues sobbing and hyperventilating. "Where is the pain?" he asks. Cezanne first puts her hand over her heart, then her stomach. The doctor instructs one of the nurses to get a wheelchair. "We must get her to the labor ward, quick," he orders. "I'm not leaving Charles," she cries out. "Cezanne, you're in labor. You can't give birth here." Janice speaks firmly as she helps the nurse force her into the wheelchair. From there on, everything becomes a blur to Cezanne. Not even she can tell if her loud wails are from the labor pains or her grieving. As they wheel her up to the labor ward, the nurse asks, "Did you bring your notes?" She shakes her head. "They're in my car." Janice explains that she had seen Cezanne's baby bag sitting by the front door when she collected Ma Ankra, and had instinctively picked it up as well. She asks if one of the boys could go for it. "I'm not leaving Mum," Elijah states bluntly. "It's okay, I'll go," Maria offers. "Good idea," says Portia. "I'll come with you." "I'd like to stay for the birth too, if that's okay," Maria asks. "It would be good for Ebony." "Are you okay with that?" Janice asks Cezanne, who nods as she grimaces in pain. Somehow, Charles's death has created a bond between them all. "Mummy, I want to stay with you," Ebony pleads. This creates a dilemma. Dave wants to stay with Charles's body, and children aren't allowed on the labour ward. "I'm sure if we explain the situation, they might make an exception," the nurse assures them. For now, Dave and Ma Ankra stay with Charles's body, while Maria and Ebony leave with Portia to collect the baby bag from Janice's car. By the time they return, the nurse has explained to the midwife that Ebony's father has just passed away and her baby brother is about to be born. "Can she stay? None of us want to miss it," Maria pleads. The midwife finally agrees, but insists that she would have to wait outside the labour ward until after the baby has been born. So Maria and Ebony remain in the waiting room. From Cezanne's perspective, everything is one big haze. She can't tell if the pain she's feeling is from her broken heart or contractions. She has no will left to push, yet nature is taking its course anyway. She can vaguely make out her sisters bending over her, urging her to push, while the midwife places a gas and air mask over her face. As she brings forth new life, she continues wailing and sobbing with one long groan after another, asking, "Why me? Why now?" Charles had attended every prenatal appointment, and now he isn't even here for the birth. Within an hour and a half, Cezanne gives birth to a beautiful, healthy baby boy. But when the midwife places him on her chest, she turns away. Her sisters take over, helping the midwife weigh, wash and dress the baby, while the midwife delivers the placenta. Cezanne continues moaning with long, painful groans long after the labour is over. The doctor is called again. "I think it is best if I sedate her. She's in shock. She's been through a lot this evening." As Cezanne appears to be delirious and sobbing hopelessly, her sisters agree. She's in no fit state to look after the baby she has just delivered. After the doctor gives her the injection, she slowly drifts off to sleep. As Cezanne enters her alpha state, she becomes detached from her physical body and is immediately transported into a space of intense bright light. Charles appears as an ethereal form of pure love and light. As he walks towards her, he smiles with such a peaceful, happy expression. A powerful healing presence envelopes her. He doesn't speak in words, but she understands everything he is communicating to her perfectly. He lets her know that he is alive and well, just not in his physical body. He says not to worry about him. He had fulfilled his sole purpose in this lifetime, and that it was time for him to move on. He had been on a mission of love, which he had completed. He reminds her that he had left a precious gift for her to cherish, and that he will always be there with her in spirit, that she shouldn't mourn his death, but celebrate his life. As he draws her close to him, a divine healing presence fills every part of her being with pure, unconditional love until she becomes part of it. She feels warm, peaceful, and happy. When Cezanne regains consciousness, the intensity of her grief has diminished considerably. She had been given a glimpse through the veil and had seen Charles's soul, and now knows that mortality is only an illusion, and that death is only a separation of the true self from the body. She feels a new sense of hope, knowing that Charles can never die, and that she can never be separated from him. Death truly has no sting. It's simply a transitioning of the eternal spirit from the physical to the spiritual realm, back to its source, which is love. Cezanne finally realizes that love isn't a feeling, it's a state of being. In her new state of enlightenment, she remembers the true and original nature of her own soul. She is love, she is peace, she is joy, she is light. Seeing the real Charles had reminded her of her own immortality, and now she knows her own soul purpose and destiny, to remind others of who they truly are. As her consciousness expands, she remembers the lesson of loving and letting go, of being detached from outcomes and having no expectations of other souls she's in relationship with. Cezanne had loved being able to call Charles my husband, but in truth he was not a possession for her to own or to keep, but had simply been on loan to her from the divine, sent to help her achieve her goals in life. In that moment, she consciously sets a new goal for herself: to give love freely with no expectations, and to detach from everything, including her children, because they are not her possessions. They are sacred souls on their own sacred journeys, who came through her from the divine. In truth, nothing belongs to her. When the time comes for her to leave her body, she would take nothing with her. As Maria hands her baby boy to her, the excitement of having brought forth a new life, mixed with the grief of Charles's death, is a bittersweet combination. But it's time to let go of her negative emotions and to realise that Charles is still very much alive. As she holds her baby and looks into his wide, alert eyes, she thinks she sees something familiar. They say the eyes are the windows to a person's soul. Could it really be Charles? She whispers with a trembling voice. Narrated by the author Cezanne Poetess. Intro and outro music by my youngest son, Azaba. Edited by my brother, Antonio Noel of Virgo 17 Productions. Download Year 12 the aftermath.